All right, we are at 11:30. Good afternoon, everybody. We are so grateful that you all are joining us for I think this is our fifth leadership study now as part of your 8 Steps to Your Leadership Rebuild series. I'm Sheree Coet with CWLI, and we are going to be hearing from Dr. Christina Shenvi on the topic of intention, aligning your time with your values. If at any point in time you have questions, feel free to use the chat feature or, raise your hand. We want this to be as engaging as possible. If you've had a chance to do any of the pre-work that we sent over, we'd love to take time to hear from you on what you learned through that process. But without further ado, I am going to pass it over to Martha, who serves on our programs committee, and she graciously connected us with Dr. Shenvi. So she is going to be making our introductions this afternoon.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Christina Shenvi, MD, PhD, MBA. She's a practicing emergency physician in Durham, North Carolina. She also teaches and coaches about time management and productivity. She helps individuals identify their goals and meet them with less stress. When it comes to time management, Dr. Shenvi has ample opportunity to walk the talk as a mom of 4 children. In addition, she is an associate professor of emergency medicine at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and director of the UNC Office of Academic Excellence for the School of Medicine, coordinating coaching and academic support programs for the students. Dr. Shenvi is a passionate educator and has received multiple institutional and national teaching awards. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you. Good morning. How we spend our time is how we spend our lives. If we fritter it away doing things that we don't really care about, or if we live, as this series is about, with intention, that makes all the difference. My name's Christina Shenvi. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I do practice medicine, but part of what I love is helping people manage their time with less stress. And here's the take-home point. Really managing our time is not about our time. It's about managing ourselves. It's about understanding what our priorities are and then creating our lives in line with them. I encourage you over the course of this time together to take some old school notes. I'm going to give you a lot of different ideas, kind of a menu of things to try. It's not like a buffet. You don't have to try one of everything. Just pick 1 or 2 things to try. If you're comfortable, I encourage you to turn on your camera so we can see you. We are going to have some parts where you can put in comments or thoughts. So if you have either another monitor or a way to type or even your phone, you will be able to do it on that. I encourage you, though, to stow your other devices. Even having a phone on the desk next to you can cause us to perform worse on complicated tasks. Now, often when we go to talks about time management, we end up with a slew of here's the new app you should use. Here's how you should organize your schedule. Here's how you can calendar share. And if it were just that, none of us would have any problems. You can all figure out how to use apps or how to share a Google Calendar. Really, fundamentally, it's about changing how we think and how we prioritize. Okay, so the way that the platform that we're going to use today to kind of interact some is called Padlet. And this is our first kind of trial one. So you can either type in that little web link, and I'll put it in the chat so you can copy it too, or you can scan the QR code. So it's padlet.com/CL and then /CWLI. So you can copy that and put it in your browser from the chat or scan the QR code. And what I'd like you to do, and I'll show you what this will look like, is this is our warm-up question, to put in here, how do you or others talk about time? So you go to the website, let me know if you're having any trouble getting there. This will be anonymous, so no one's going to see what you write. And what you do is click the plus button below the first column. How do you or others talk about time? How do you,
Christina, I think
yes.
maybe Padlet is misspelled because I got a 404.
Oh, I apologize. Let me, oh, you're right. I apologize. Padlet, not paddled. CWLI. There you go. Try that one.
Thank you.
Let me know if it is not working. So what kinds of things do you hear people say? I'll give you a minute. Jeez. Sorry, I think I misspelled this, but it looks like you guys are on. Okay, I have too many things to do. I am so busy, there's just not enough time. Not enough time in the day. Not enough of it. Any other things? What do you hear people say? I can't do one more thing. Yep, that one more thing is just gonna like break the camel's back. So isn't it interesting? Often our statements about time are negative. We kind of see time as our adversary, something that we have to conquer. We have to conquer our time and our time management, rather than seeing our time as an asset or something that we can work with, or a gift. For goodness sakes, we don't have that much time on this planet. Our time is a gift. Okay, thank you for, that was our warm up there. Let's think about this. To change the results that we're getting, to change the results of whether it's our time, what we're getting done, or how we are approaching our lives, we have to have different actions. But to change our actions, we have to change our thoughts and our feelings. So this is not just about like grin and bear it, white knuckle and get through it, just do it. This is changing fundamentally how we think and how we feel. David Allen, who's the author of Getting Things Done, he said to be productive, we have to have, or to be effective, we have to have a mind like water, calm, fluid, flexible, deep. Instead, often our mind looks like this kind of water. It's so cluttered. There's all this mind trash, things that maybe other people have thrown in there, things that other people have said about us that bubble to the surface when we are trying to do things that matter to us. Maybe it's, oh, you shouldn't spend time going to the gym. You shouldn't take time for yourself. You should go do this other thing. Or everyone else is faster, better, smarter than you. Whatever it is, all of that mind trash gets in the way of us becoming effective. So the goals of time empowerment are not to be working every moment. It's really to feel less stress and less overwhelm. And it's to create more meaning by living intentionally. Okay, now you've all gotten to the Padlet, and if not, there's the link again. My question for you here is, what are the biggest challenges that you face with your time management? What are the biggest challenges that you face right now? So pop back onto the Padlet and tell me what your biggest challenges are. Not getting the things you want to achieve. Yep. When I stop for any task, email overwhelms me. Yes, the never ending like pitter patter of email. So many things to get done. I struggle with where to time. I lose time. Others' expectations, competing priorities, doing what's important to me versus what everyone else wants. These are excellent things to bring to the table. So in order to improve, we can approach things in this way. Almost any time management challenge or problem can be described within a problem in one or more of these steps. So to empower our time, we have to intentionally manage each of these: deciding, planning, doing, and reflecting. So that's where we're going to go today. First, deciding. The only way to get more time in your day is to be strategic about what you do and efficient in how you do it. So this is kind of a silly example. This is a friend of mine who is a surgeon, and someone asked her when she was in her training, working 80 hours a week, how do you have time to do your hair and your makeup? And she says, I don't have time. I make time. Now, maybe it's not hair and makeup. Maybe it's other things. Maybe it's family. Maybe it's going to the gym. You will never have time. No one will hand you a block of time. You have to make time for the things that matter to you. One of the things I love reading about is Stoic philosophy. And one of the tenets of Stoic wisdom is the pursuit of what's called in Greek eudaimonia, which means perfect human flourishing. And one of the concepts that Stoic philosophy teaches is that it's important to give attention to things in due proportion to their worth. So if I ask you, how important is this task? And you say not important at all. How much time are you spending on it? Lots and lots of time. Well, maybe there's a disconnect there versus how important is your health? How important is your family? How important are these other things to you? The attention you give something should be in due proportion to its worth. One of the other concepts that is important for deciding what you do is understanding really what matters to you. Sometimes we can have spent so many years doing what other people tell us that is important that we've forgotten what we actually even care about. In his book, Built to Last, Jim Collins coined this term the BHAG, or the big, hairy, audacious goal. And he was studying companies, and he looked at what was it that made some companies really effective over the long haul. And he found that companies that had a clear vision or mission were more likely to be successful because having that helped them maintain a relentless sense of urgency. So here's a couple examples. Donald Berwick was the CEO of the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, and he wanted to save patients from some of the errors or mistakes or infections that have happened in the hospital. But instead of just saying, okay, we want to, improve care for patients, which is very vague, he said, we should save 100,000 lives. Some is not a number, soon is not a time. 100,000 by June 14th at 2006. So having that clear vision helped galvanize and motivate people to get it done. Or think about Kennedy, who had the clear goal before the decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. And there's a probably apocryphal story of when Kennedy visited the space station in Florida, and he was visiting people, shaking hands, and he spoke with a janitor. And he asked the janitor, "What do you do here?" And the man said, "I'm putting a man on the moon." So taking part in that vision and sharing that vision had transformed the janitor's work of cleaning bathrooms into, I'm part of putting a man on the moon. So as we're deciding what's important to us, the other concept I like, or the image, is this idea called the hedgehog concept. And it comes from a fragment of ancient Greek poetry that says the fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one thing well. And the idea is that the hedgehog is the one thing, or maybe more than a couple, maybe two or three things that you are really about. I am about taking care of patients. I am about helping people with time management, and I am about my family. Those are the three big hedgehogs that I have. And you can have 2 or 3 hedgehogs, but you can't have 20 hedgehogs. When we are floundering and feeling like everything is just overwhelming us, often it's because we have split our energy and have too many priorities. So once we have identified what are the 2 or 3 things that are important to you, that allows us to answer the questions, what things do you really have to do? And what can you outsource? For example, I have 4 kids. No one else in the world can have mommy time with my kids. I could hire a babysitter. I could, order Blue Apron or have, meals delivered. No one else can have mommy time with my kids. I can't outsource a date with my husband. I can't pay someone to go on a date with him. That's something only I can do. So once you understand what your hedgehogs are, then you can say, all right, this is something I really have to do. How can I outsource or delegate other things? It also allows you to answer the question, where do I need to do A+ work? And where can I do B- work? Now, this is very antithetical. Many of us think, oh my gosh, every piece of work has to be an A+. But really, there's quite a few things that you could do B- work on, and it wouldn't have any effect. When I am giving a talk or, teaching, it's important for me for that to be A+ work. My house is a solid B-. I don't have matching restoration hardware, drapes, and furniture. It's fine. It's comfortable. It's a B-. So think about, where are you over delivering when really B- work would be just fine, because that frees you up to then spend time on the things that do matter. So the first question to write down to reflect on later is, does how you spend your time and energy reflect your big goals and values? If not, why not? And where are you giving up agency? Where are you finding yourself saying things like, I have to do this, I can't do that, they're making me do this, instead of choosing to say, no, I own every minute of my day. Everything that is on my calendar, I have chosen to do. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to go into work tomorrow. Now, there may be consequences, but you are choosing to go into work each and every day. You are choosing to do every single thing that you are spending your time on. So taking that locus of control back and owning full agency for what you're doing is the first step. And then saying, what are my big values? Let me get reconnected to those things. And then let me create my schedule around it. So some practical strategies are to write down your big goals and mission. Write down what you're doing and think about where there's overlap or where there are a lot of things that you're doing that really have no value to you. So that was decide. Now let's think about planning. This is about creating priorities and systems. I love this Japanese concept called the ikigai. And the idea is that you will find the most fulfillment and meaning at the intersection of what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at. And a great exercise is to write down all the things you're doing and then draw arrows to where they overlap with these circles. And you will find the things that you really are excited about fall pretty close to the middle. Now, there's many things we do that maybe we're not paid for. Maybe it's coaching your kid's sports team or doing some sort of volunteer work. You're not paid for it, but it really fills your cup. So looking at things through this lens can be helpful. I also use it whenever people ask me to do something. I think about, okay, will I love this? Is this important? Does the world need it? Am I good at it? And bonus, if I can be paid for it. So using this lens can help you then say, you know what? This is only overlapping with one circle. This is only overlapping with two circles. This is something I'm going to say no to, or this is something I'm going to take off my plate. The other way to think about prioritizing is using what's called the Eisenhower matrix. So if you look at the things that you plan to do in a given day, some of them are urgent and important. You need to just do them. And those are the things that we usually find ourselves doing, and we're constantly kind of just trying to keep up and put out those fires. But many times our dreams live in this non-urgent but important box. Maybe you have a dream of getting a new training or certification, or of starting a side business, or of switching jobs, or of looking to get a promotion or apply for a new position. And it's not urgent, so we never actually end up doing it. For these things, the non-urgent but things that are important to you, that's where we really need to be intentional about planning and scheduling them, creating the time for them. You have to make time for them. Eventually, maybe things move into the urgent category, or we just give up. We decide, you know what, that's not important. I'm not going to be able to do it anymore. Has anyone ever told you this? You can do it all. You can be a woman, maybe it's a wife, maybe it's a mother, maybe it's a partner, maybe it's a business owner. You can do it all. No, let me go ahead and disabuse you of that notion. We cannot do it all. And the longer that we try to, the more we are going to find ourselves frustrated and tired. One of the exercises that, if you haven't received it, you'll get it sent out later, that can be incredibly helpful is to track to see where your time is going. This is a friend of mine, Laura Vanderkam, has written a bunch of books about this. And what she found is that people think they're spending more time on work than they are. They think, oh yeah, I'm spending 65, 70 hours a week on work. And then when you actually track it by half-hour increments, maybe you're only spending 45 hours at work. So where are those extra hours going? Or we think we're spending only 2 hours a week on social media or Netflix or whatever it is, but actually we're spending 25 hours a week. So the first step to really making changes is understanding where our time goes. So I encourage you after this session in the next week to track your time for 1 week and then look at it through these lenses. First, priority. Are you doing the things that matter? Second, strategy? Are you doing them in the right way? Are you doing them, at the right time of day? Are you doing them in ways that get them done strategically? And third, efficiency. Are you doing them in the right amount of time? Or are you allowing things that really just need 1 hour for B- work? Are you allowing them to take 8 hours? So plan strategically. Another way to plan your time strategically is to think about your focus and to plan your deep work strategically. Let me explain what that means. How to work with a deep focus. Cal Newport wrote the book Deep Work, and he gives this equation. He says the high quality work produced equals time spent times intensity of focus. So if you take all your focus, like all your brain power, and apply it for 1 hour, maybe you can get as much done as if you're working for 3 hours, but you're also kind of checking your email, you're checking your phone, you're constantly being distracted, you're answering phone calls, you're texting. So now that task that could have taken 1 hour has taken 3 hours. So deep work is work that we're doing when we're focused and distraction free. We're really thinking and planning and doing things, not just thinking of the fact that, oh, I have to do that. We're actually sitting down and doing it. We're developing ideas or strategies, and it tends to bring more joy and fulfillment. It can certainly be exhausting after a long day of, deep work. It can be very exhausting, but it's more fulfilling. Whereas shallow work is the often short, interrupted things. Most emails, if you have like a lot of just busy work or scheduling or managing small logistics, those things don't take as much focus. We have to do them, they just don't take as much focus. So look at the nature of your work and plan it strategically. Really, this is about protecting our cognitive bandwidth. If we are trying to focus on something, but our attention is scattered and distracted, we're not going to be able to bring our full focus to it. And this is the scary thing that he says. He says, spend enough time in frenetic shallowness, and you permanently reduce your capacity to perform deep work. So if we constantly are living in this state of jumping from one screen to another, scrolling different apps, we're living in frenetic shallowness, and we can lose our ability to work with a deep focus. So how can we do deep work? Well, first, create mental space. It starts with a clear mind. One of the things that I do to help clear my mind at the start of a day or start of a work time is to write down all my thoughts. It's incredible what will come out when you do that. And suddenly you'll find, oh, no wonder I can't focus. I'm worried about XYZ. I'm worried I'm a bad mom. I'm worried about this or that. I'm worried I won't get this promotion. So create mental space by taking all those thoughts and just writing them down. That's a good place to start. Second, create time blocks. It's very hard to do deep work for like 5-10 minutes at a time. You really need to schedule a chunk of time to do your deep work that requires a deep focus. I also schedule it during the times of day when I know I focus well. So kind of 9 to 11 a.m. is a great chunk of time for me to focus. Some people say 5 to 7 a.m. That's not my time, but some people love that time to get up while it's quiet, and they really do their deep work then. And then plan how you will use it. First good step is just to put in deep work time on your calendar, but then the next step is to plan. What are you going to do during that time? Otherwise, when you sit down to work, your brain will suggest, let me just check my email real quick. Let me just do this little task. Let me just knock this out. And there's this small hits of dopamine that we get when we knock out those little things, like every email, we get a little hit of dopamine. But then we can end up 2 hours later having just done those tiny tasks and never done the things that really matter. And third, assess, look at your day. How did your day go? Not from a place of judgment, but from a place of curiosity. How could I do something differently tomorrow so that I can use my time better? Okay, so you've created the mental space, you have the mind like water, you've created time blocks. Now, how do you actually work with a deep focus when you sit down? First, avoid interruptions as much as possible. That means turning off your phone unless you're expecting, an important call, closing your door if you can, or kind of cloistering, putting a do not disturb sign. Avoid interruptions. Also avoid rapid task switching or attempts to multitask. Now, I know some work just requires this. So when I'm in the emergency room, I have to task switch rapidly. I have to go see this patient, this patient, and I'm rapidly switching from one thing to another. But when you have the opportunity and you really want to focus, avoid task switching or multitasking as much as possible. And then creating cognitive closure can also help us. If you give yourself a little bit of time pressure, say, okay, I'm going to work on this for an hour and a half, and then I will check that off, some sort of ritual. I love checking things off on boxes. That's my ritual that gives me closure, and then moving on to something else. The problem with interruptions is several. First, look at these two little graphics. Which one does your day look more like? Where your deep work is the blue-gray, and then your interruptions or your shallow work is the purple. Often, we allow our shallow work to interrupt our thought processes throughout the day. And studies have shown, for example, that if you lump your email checking times to 3 times a day, rather than constantly having it open or constantly having notifications dinging, you actually spend less time on email total if you chunk it. You say, okay, I'll check my email at 10 a.m., at 1 p.m., and at 4 p.m. You will spend less time overall rather than if you're checking it constantly throughout the day. Here's the other problem. Let's say you're working on one task, and then you switch to another task, but you're still kind of thinking about the first task. You have what's called an attention residue, where your mind is still thinking about the last thing that you were doing. Now, if you switch again, you have even less cognitive bandwidth. Or if there's a lot of stuff going on in the background, that can sap your ability to focus. The third problem is the time wasted with an interruption lag. If you're working on some task and then you get interrupted, there's kind of a lag between each of those. And then when you resume, there's another lag of just wasted time where you're trying to figure out, what was I thinking about? What was my train of thought? And maybe it's only 60 seconds. But if you multiply that times the 60 or 70 interruptions that we have per day, that's over an hour just lost in our task switching. I think about this like a focus train. So imagine one of those Japanese bullet trains that can go 200 miles an hour. If it stops every 2 miles, it's never really getting up to speed. And that's the same with our focus. If we're stopping and interrupting ourselves every 2 minutes, we're never really getting up to speed. So these are some ideas for how to improve your ability to focus. Avoid interruptions as much as possible. So structure your calendar appropriately to make time when you can. Avoid rapid task switching and attempts to multitask. And then have some sort of time pressure where you say, here's when I'm going to work on this, and then create a ritual for closure. Okay, so I want you to reflect on this so far, and you can put it in the Padlet. What is one thing you can do to improve your ability to do deep work? And now you may say, you know what, I can't just turn off my phone. I have to be available to clients. Okay, then that's not one of the things you can do. So jump back onto that link or the QR code. What is one thing you can do to improve your ability to do deep work? Good, plan for it, plan ahead. Any other things? Reduce multitasking. Schedule blocks of time early in the morning. Yes, to tackle the toughest tasks. That was a tongue twister. Checking emails only 3 times a day. Wouldn't that be freeing? Now, I will warn you, very likely, if you try to do that, if you try to limit it to only 3 times a day, your brain, like if you're used to checking it every 5 minutes, is going to feel really uncomfortable at first. It's like weaning yourself off of an addiction. Our brains are so addicted to that constant stimulation. So your brain is going to have a little bit of tough time, but then after a while, you'll see the benefits. Good. Schedule and not have open emails for a task. Great, great ideas. Or even simple things, closing the doors to the area where you're working, creating a little bit of a quieter space. So the flip side to deep work is then the shallow work. We still have to answer we still choose to answer our emails. We still choose to do all those other things that our jobs require. How can we do them as efficiently as possible? Think about this. Let's say you have 60 minutes of work to do, just like this shallow work, the emails, the other things that you're going to do, but they don't take a deep focus. What if you could take that 60 minutes of work and do it in 45 minutes? That's not a huge lift. Probably we could do it most of the time. If you just go from doing something in 60 minutes to 45 minutes over an 8-hour day, you've saved 2 hours. So those small habits, the small habits of not having your phone in the room or not opening your email except for 3 times a day, closing the door, planning your work that you're going to do, those small things can add up to huge amounts of time saving over time. Maybe that means being able to go home on time, or maybe it means not bringing work home with you. So how can we be efficient? Well, one of the ways to think about this is I'm adapting the 2-minute rule from getting things done. So let's say you're going through your email or your shallow tasks. You want to have some sort of plan. So here's my plan. First, delete as much as I possibly can. Second, if I'm doing shallow work, if it takes less than 2 minutes, I'm going to just do it right then and there. If it's going to take more than 2 minutes, like somebody emails me and says, hey, can you review this paper? That's going to take more than 2 minutes. I need to add that to my deep work time. Delegate. If it's not in line with your values or not something that you have to be doing, delegate as much as you can. Defer. So if it's something that's going to require deep work, defer it to your task list or your calendar to do when you're doing your deep work. And then decline. If this is not in line with your values and you are able to decline it without, having other issues like losing your job, decline it. And desubscribe. Your future self will thank you for that extra 20 seconds that it takes to get rid of all the email lists that you're on. So how can we work efficiently? How can we take that 60 minutes of work and do it in 45 minutes? It starts with a clear mind. It starts with a mind like water. Because if our mind is telling us, let's just check Facebook, let's check Instagram, then we are not going to be able to work with focus and efficiency. Second, close the open loops. Open loops are the enemy of productivity. This is what I mean. Maybe some of you remember this Pong game from back in, I think, the 80s, where there was a bar at the bottom that you would navigate back and forth, and you had to keep the balls from bouncing down on the bottom of the screen. So let's say you're sitting there working, and then the thought comes into your head, I need to get milk. Now that thought is an open loop. That thought is bouncing around in your head until you do something with it. And then you think, oh my gosh, I need to prepay my taxes. Oh, I need to call so-and-so. Oh, I need to send that email. I need to get a birthday present for my kid's birthday. I need to get cat food. I need to make a vet appointment for my cat. All of these things are like balls in the air that you have to keep up at any given moment. That drains your energy. It drains your ability to focus. And in fact, by just writing those things down, very simply, that's the very simplest method, writing those things down, studies have shown that it helps you, it stops you from thinking about them as much. I think about that as like taking all your balls, your Pong balls, and stacking them, getting them out of play. When you do that, it reduces the intrusive thoughts that you're having, the worry about, oh, I've got to get that birthday present, I've got to get cat litter. It stops those intrusive thoughts. And most importantly, it helps you perform better on whatever you are doing. So in order to stack those Pong balls and get them out of your head, you need to create a reliable system. The simplest method is just to write it down. So I need to get milk, I need to mail the package, I need to send that email, I need to do my budgets, I need to do my taxes. You just write it down. This is pretty simple, but then it's not really in a format that helps you to work with it later. A slightly better method is to categorize those things as they come into your head, to write them down. Okay, this is my personal category. These are some talks that are coming up, some administrative things that I have to do. There are lots of different ways. There is no best way. You will need to experiment a little bit to see what works for you. Some of the popular ones, things like bullet journals are really popular, or planners if you want paper. There's also lots and lots of apps out there. I've tried, I think, almost all of these just to see how they compare and contrast. There's pros and cons to each system. Having an online system is nice because then you can access it on your phone or your computer or wherever you are. However, a word of warning, they're so nice that we get on those apps and we're like, wow, this is great. I can put all my things to do, and we keep adding and adding and adding things to do. And then we look at it and we think, this is overwhelming. I don't want to do this. So we have kind of a graveyard of apps that we have started and then stopped using that we never return to. So I would say the main word of caution, if you're going to try out one of these, is to be really careful to not overload it with everything. If you wanted to pick one that I like that's free and that is pretty intuitive is called Trello. It allows you to make different boards. So I have one where I keep track of my books to read. So when someone's like, oh, you would really love this book, I can put it there. That takes it out of my head. And then different either career projects or personal projects that I'm working on. And then within each of those boards, you have different categories. So I have different projects, and you can kind of color code them if you want for things that are urgent or that you want to focus on. Or you can keep track of lists, like here is my different books that I want to read. So it doesn't matter what your system is, but it needs to have several criteria. Main one, you can use it. You'll put things into it and you'll come back to it to then work on it. After trying all of these systems, I still just really like an old school piece of paper with categorized to-do things. And as I get them done, then I switch to a new piece of paper and I transfer over the things that are still pending. And that kind of keeps them in my mind. So how to improve your shallow work? Pick a system. Pick a system and then manage that system. Add things, prioritize it, but you have to return to it so that you make sure that you are keeping it up to date. And then manage your email by blocking off time and creating a system for how you approach your email. Okay, let's hop back on here onto the Padlet. There's the link again. What is one thing that you can do to improve your shallow work? What's the one easiest step? Pick an easy step for something you can do to improve how you manage your shallow work. Categorize, good. Yeah, that's a good, easy way to say, all right, I have different projects in these categories, or I have different projects and these are the tasks. Another important thing is if you're making a to-do list, don't just put down projects, put down tasks. So for example, let's say you're buying a home. Buy home is a project, not a task. If you just put buy home, then your brain, when you come to look at your to-do list, is going to say, I don't know what to do. What do I do with buy home? I can't just like buy a home, right? So buy home might be a project. The tasks might be look up get recommendations for a real estate agent, or look at market availability in my region, or, whatever it is, write down specific tasks within those projects. Good. Okay. So some good comments from the Padlet. Write down the pop-in thoughts I have, eliminate or defer the least important tasks, schedule a few times each day to check and review email so you don't get distracted. I love lists. I just have to make sure to revisit them on a consistent basis. Yes. And creating habits is an amazing way to overcome these things that we keep telling ourselves, oh, I need to do this. I just haven't done it. So for example, when you get into your work, or if you work from home, your space, checking that list and prioritizing for the day. So one of the things I will do, for example, is come in and say, all right, these are the projects and these are the tasks that each project has. What are the things I want to get done today? And I'll say, all right, these are the 3 things I really want to do today. And then here's the bonus things that it would be really nice to do. And that way I can prioritize within each day, but keeping in mind my big term, longer goals and picture of what I have going on. Okay, let me come back here.
I have a quick question on that. Are we allowed to ask questions now?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So Christina, I do all of those things already, but I find sometimes I'm avoiding some things on my list and they keep rolling forward.
Yes. Perfect question.
Yeah. Okay, great. I'll stop
I'm going to
there.
get into that right. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Yes.
Okay.
So we have those things on our list that we're like, oh, this was on my list for last month. And now I've pulled it again forward to this month. And I know I'm just going to kick the can down the street for next month. What is going on there? Well, there could be a lot of different things. So let's dive into that. Here we go. This comes to how do we then do things? Like Stephanie said, we've got our to-do list. We've got our calendar. We're all good with that. And then we look at it and we're like, I just cannot get myself to do this task. What is going on? And this is where managing our time is really about managing ourselves and managing our emotions. This is a great article from the New York Times about why we procrastinate. And she said, we have this irrational cycle of procrastinating on certain tasks, maybe not every task, because of a difficulty managing negative moods around a task. And procrastination is self-harm, or there's a whole literature around procrastination, and they call it self-sabotage. At its core, it's about emotions, not productivity. Now, to dive into this a little bit deeper and go into a little bit of theory, I want to introduce you to this concept called self-worth theory. And the idea is that we have some abilities, we put in effort, that leads to our performance, and that's how we get our sense of self-worth. So for better or worse, this is a big part of how, not the only part, but a big part of how we get our sense of self-worth. Now, if we are worried that we will not perform well, sometimes what we do is sever the link between our abilities and our performance with self-sabotage or defensive pessimism. And these are called self-worth protection strategies. So think about, maybe you were in college or high school and you were worried you're not going to do well on a test. What do we sometimes feel tempted to do? Well, I just won't study that hard. I'll just leave it to the last minute. And that way it won't be as painful if I fail. So self-worth protection strategies are maladaptive patterns of behavior that we use to protect our self-worth in case of failure. So let me show you some really interesting data from the 70s. This was a study of how much shame or incompetence students felt when they failed. So if you had put in a lot of effort, E+ for effort, and you failed, you felt the most shame or incompetence. If you had put in a lot of effort, but you had excuses like, oh, well, I studied this and they tested that, my car broke down, my girlfriend broke up with me, I got strep throat, then you felt less shame. If you didn't put in much effort, you're like, oh, I just studied the last minute, so it's not a big deal, you felt less shame. And if you put in low effort and had excuses, then you felt the least shame. So we don't do this. We don't procrastinate because we're stupid sometimes. We do it to prevent that sense of shame in case we fail. That's not the only reason, but that's one reason. And we do that with things like withholding effort. Oh, I didn't really try my hardest on that. I just left it to the last minute. Or making excuses or lowering our expectations. Oh, I knew I wouldn't be good at that. I knew that was just not going to turn out well. The self-worth theory can also explain in part why we sometimes overwork. We cannot afford to not perform well. And so we put in so much effort that we're working overtime. We're working in the evenings, we're working on the weekends, and we're constantly putting in so much effort to prevent ourselves from failing at it. So some practical strategies for how to not self-sabotage are to really focus on the effort. Now, I told you this was the equation, but really our abilities matter less and our effort matters much more. Our effort really is what matters, but we need to put effort in the right way. Angela Duckworth wrote the book Grit, which is a great book. And she says effort counts twice. You have some talent and you put in effort, that gives you a skill. Then you take that skill and put in more effort, and that brings your achievement. So I think about your talent as your position and your effort as your velocity. Second, learn to love the process itself. Learn to love the process of learning and developing, not just the goal itself. Oh, sorry, I'm going to skip this. And part of that is having a growth mindset. This is another book, if you want one book to read, is Mindset by Carol Dweck. And the idea is that when we have a growth mindset, we're less afraid to fail because we see challenges as opportunities to grow rather than threats to our performance and our identity. And third, and this is easier said than done, decoupling our performance and our self-worth. What if we had our abilities, our effort, and our performance, and our self-worth was not even on the table? I was working with a group of medical students, and somebody was telling me how she kept procrastinating on working on this research project because she was afraid she would send it to her advisor and her professor, who would then say it was no good. And that would kind of impact her sense of self. And so I asked the group, well, where does we'll call her Susan, where does Susan's sense of self-worth come from? And they thought about it and they said, well, her past performance. And I said, well, what if she had never done anything good in the past? Would she be any less valuable? And they thought about it and they said, okay, no. So where does her sense of value come from? And they said, well, from her friends and family who love her. And I said, well, what if tomorrow her friends and family decided not to love her anymore? Would she have less value? And slowly they kind of realized that, yes, our self-worth is not even up for grabs. It's not part of the equation. So focusing on effort, learning to love the process and growth, and then taking our self-worth off the table completely. Now, this part may get a little bit more to what you were asking, Stephanie, which has to do with how managing our time is all about managing our emotions. Procrastination isn't a unique character flaw or some sort of curse on you, but it can often be a way of coping with the challenging emotions or negative moods induced by a task. Things like boredom, anxiety, insecurity, frustration. I remember years ago, I had a paper I had to write, and I just kept putting it off. I kept saying, I just don't have time for this month, next month. I kept kicking the can down the road. And eventually I realized, I could have made time if I had wanted, but I was avoiding the boredom. I didn't want to feel the boredom of writing this paper. I was kind of anxious. What if I write it and nobody reads it? What if I write it and they read it and they say it's no good? Or frustration at myself. Now it's been a year and a half and I haven't written it. Now I'm really frustrated, self-doubt, etc. So sometimes when we have those tasks that we are kicking down the road, it's because we're avoiding some of these emotions. Now, sometimes it's because it's not part of our vision and it doesn't matter to us, in which case then we need to think about, should this even be on our list? Is there a way to delegate this? Is there a way to decline it? Or is there a way to, take it off of our plate? But when we have something that we have told ourselves, yes, I want to do this, but we keep putting it off, I would look at what are some of the emotions we are avoiding, or what are some of the reasons we're avoiding this? And I think about this like an activation barrier. Maybe you've had this experience where you put something off for months and months and months, and then finally you sit down to do it, and it's really not that bad. It's not that bad, and you actually find yourself enjoying it. But there's that huge activation barrier. So what is inside that activation barrier? Well, sometimes it can be fear of failure. If we don't start, we can't fail. Sometimes it can be that self-worth preservation of, if I leave it to the last minute, then if I don't do a good job, it won't be as devastating. And sometimes it's that avoidance of negative emotions. So I want you to think about one task that you have been putting off for a long time. Anything. Sometimes it's, when I survey people on what tasks do you procrastinate on most, it's often either mundane tasks that are just boring. Like I need to, I want to reorganize my garage. It's just kind of boring. Or it's big tasks that are kind of risky or nebulous. And think about that task. What emotion does it evoke when you start thinking about it? And I want you to put in the chat on the Padlet, what is one feeling that you procrastinate to avoid? Is it boredom? Is it anxiety? Is it self-doubt? And if you can, think about a specific task that failure, fear of failure. That's a big one. Anxiety. Yeah, I don't want to sit down and write this paper. It makes me feel anxious every time I do. What else? Oh, yeah, failure. Any other emotions? Boredom. Yeah, boredom for the boring tasks, and then like anxiety for the complicated tasks, right? Writing handwritten thank you notes to big donors. Lack of achievement. Yes, I'm going to put in all this work and nobody's going to appreciate the fact that I've done it. Why would I do this? Not meeting expectations. Yeah, it kind of ties into the fear of failure. Isn't it interesting how these tasks that we think of as relatively mundane, there's a lot of feelings that go into actually getting them done. So let's think then about how we can overcome that activation barrier of getting started. The first step is to cultivate curiosity. I think about curiosity like a puppy. So when you let your puppy outside, it runs around. It doesn't want to just smell one piece of grass. It wants to smell all the grass, right? It wants to smell all the trees. Let your curiosity run around and answer the question, what emotion am I avoiding right now? Is this boredom? Is this anxiety? And then you can think about, okay, well, am I willing to feel boredom for an hour in order to get this done? Can I really focus deeply for 1 hour, feel the boredom? The boredom will not kill me, I promise, and get this done. Or 2, explore how the work aligns with your big values and mission. Maybe I know somebody mentioned writing those thank you letters. Well, how is that of value to you? Maybe that helps you then build connections for future fundraising, and that's important to you or to your mission. Or maybe it helps you stay connected and show appreciation, and that's important to you, to be a person who shows appreciation. So explore how it aligns with your big values and mission. And if it doesn't, and maybe this is something you can defer, then defer it. Albert Gray says that one of the keys to success is that we subordinate our disliking of a task to the strength of our purpose. So when it's very values and mission driven, use that to then overcome the activation barrier. Or 3rd, and this is an incredibly effective way, is to say, what is the immediate next step? So that example someone gave, thank you for that, of writing handwritten thank you notes to the donors, and the feeling was boredom. So say, all right, we've been curious, the feeling is boredom. How does this align with my big values and mission? Okay, I've decided I want to do this. Let me just feel the boredom and acknowledge it and ask, what is the immediate next step? The immediate next step is I need to pull out my list of addresses and pick 3 letters to write. Your brain doesn't give you as big of a barrier to small steps. So by saying, what's the immediate next step, doing it, and then saying, what's the next step after that? Okay, now I need to address the letter and put a stamp on it. I can do that. Now I need to write 5 sentences of thank you note. I can do that. Breaking it down in that way can help reduce the barrier that your brain puts up. Or ask, can I do this for 20 minutes? Set a timer. This is called the Pomodoro method after those tomato timers, although I don't recommend using one because they tick and they then alarm really loud. But set your phone timer. Can I do this for 20 minutes and really sprint? Finally, what if I plan to fail? And I don't mean big, epic job loss failures or financial failures. I mean, can we learn to be okay enough with small failures that then that fear of failure doesn't paralyze us? Brene Brown said, if you have no tolerance for failure, you will not create anything new. So in order to be able to do difficult things, we have to get comfortable with that fear of failure or that willingness to fail. So we talked about deciding what's important to us, planning our priorities, and then understanding our own minds so that we don't self-sabotage. And the final step is reflecting. We really don't learn just from our experience. We learn from reflecting on our experience. So some questions to reflect on are what we started out with. What are your big mission and vision? What do matter to you? What are your own hedgehogs? How are you spending your time? Doing the time inventory, looking at how you can create kind of a mosaic with your deep and shallow work that fits best into your schedule. Or reflecting on your own motivation, your own thought patterns. I always procrastinate on this type of work because I'm afraid of failure, or on this type of work because of boredom. Let me start getting curious about that. To get different results, we need to act differently. But to act differently, we need to think and feel differently. So I'm going to stop there. Hopefully you can take 1 or 2 ideas from this, whether it's just scheduling your time, being strategic, working on efficiency, working on understanding your emotions. Pick one thing to think about and work on. There's tons more that we could talk about. And if you're interested, my website, I will put in the chat, has a lot of blog posts on different areas that you can get more information. And I also do individual coaching or workshops if you are interested. Let me stop there and I'll be happy to take any comments or questions. Thank you.
Christina, I'm looking at your LinkedIn. Is your website different than what you just posted on LinkedIn? I think so.
No, it should be the timeforyourlife.org. Here, I'll put up my contact info right now.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So you do a lot of things, Christina. It does sound like you do it all. Even though you told us not to do it, you can't do it all.
You can't do it all. I definitely don't. I mean, I don't, for example, I don't really cook. We don't cook much. That's like a B-. Like food in my house is a solid B-. Decoration in my house is a B-. My hair is like a C+. So like there are some things. I don't like hand sew my Halloween costumes. I don't grow organic vegetables in my backyard. Like those things are just not important to me.
Got it. That's helpful.
But here's my website and here is my contact info.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Let's see, I see a comment in the chat. Appreciate you bringing emotions into the discussion. Do you think that focus is easier or harder for women or men? You know, I have worked with both men and women. You know, my first tendency is to say, oh yeah, women. But actually, I've worked with so many men also who, for example, will come to me for time management help. And then when we dig into it, we realize this is not a time management problem. The problem is you've overcommitted because you're trying to prove yourself, because you were told at some point, or you heard at some point, like, you're not good enough, you really don't belong here. And so he was constantly striving to prove to everyone that he belonged, that he was deserved a seat at the table, that he was working like 20 hours a day. So I think we may be a little more vocal about it sometimes as women, but I think men, many of them struggle with the same things.
I think your next PhD needs to be in psychology.
Tempting, very tempting.
Christina, I don't know if you found this, but I do some coaching work too, just in my organization, and have found that a lot of men don't use like a planner or to-do list, which to me was like mind-blowing. I'm like, well, how are you keeping track of everything? And they're in my head. Like, I'm like, what is happening? How is that happening? I know they're totally different animals than we are, but I don't know.
I think, you know, I don't want to generalize too much, but I think sometimes women do end up carrying a lot of the burden of the details. So for example, if, you know, someone says, oh, let's plan a, you know, holiday party for the company. And then in their mind, they're like, oh yeah, the holiday party, that's it. That's all they need to keep track of. Whereas then the work of actually planning it, at least in my institution, often falls to a woman in the department who then has to keep track of the invitation list, the reservation, the budget, the meal planning. So yes, I think there may be some truth to that. I think it certainly varies person to person.
I liked the graphic and the comment you made about having all the interruptions so that your shallow work kept getting in the way. And I was thinking today that yesterday went really smoothly for me. I worked from home. My company was officially off, although we have a deadline coming up. So a lot of people were working, but I wasn't getting interrupted. And I was able to go to do one thing, finish it, and do the next thing, take a break, or do my email or whatever shallow piece it was. And I wasn't doing that intentionally, other than it was just, and I got done. I felt like it's been a really productive day, although hours wise, it wasn't bad. And I'm back in the office today and I'm already looking at the meetings on my calendar and people wanting my attention. And I know that as soon as I try to focus on something, somebody's going to come and try to grab me. And yeah, so I want to be very aware of it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And you like figured this out. Here's what you can do tomorrow or today, can say, hey, I just met with this time management coach and she told me to close my door. Close your door, put a do not disturb sign on. You can blame me. Anything you want to do, just blame me. Say, hey, she told me to, shut my door so I could get my deep work done. Or, I'm being a little facetious, but putting, blocking off your time on your, whatever you use, your Outlook calendar so that people don't see that you're free.
Yep.
Or putting your Outlook status as like, do not disturb, or, whatever email service you use. That way they will hopefully respect your time a little bit better. It is amazing when, I worked yesterday too, just doing kind of office-y work. And it's great when you're not getting constant emails. Or if you want, sometimes people feel guilty about, oh, I need to check my email. There's different services like Boomerang that will pause your email until you want to come back to it. So you don't see, think about all of those accumulating emails. But that's a great observation, Nicole.
I took the notifications off a long time ago, but a couple of weeks ago, I'm a little slow to the technology piece, but I learned I could take the email icon out of the tray on my iPhone so that it's not an easy hit. And so now I have to go looking for it, and I may start to go looking for it, but I'll stop myself 9 times out of 10. So I'm not getting into it out of habit as much.
I like that. Something I'm playing around with is when I feel myself trying to look at my phone or my email, and I know I'm just doing it out of habit, I'll ask, will this bring me joy? Because, I
Do you
would
ever say yes? No.
0.9% of the time, email doesn't bring me any joy. Occasionally there's a rare, like nice email that I'm like, oh, that's sweet. But most of the time it's just going to make me feel worse in my day. So I'd rather bundle that time.
Yep. You're the second person today that said to bundle the emails into fewer.
There you go.
Events.
Christina, I'd liked when you mentioned if you have a task that usually takes an hour, just try to do it a little bit faster. If you can save 15 minutes, that's 2 hours in a day. Do you have any other specific ways to sort of pull back time to do something else like that you can recommend?
Yeah. Well, one other way would be, for example, for meetings. Oftentimes we just set like 30 minutes or 60 minutes, but does it need that much time? Maybe you make it a flex time to say, first of all, if it's a 60-minute meeting, maybe we could do it in 45 minutes. Or we say, hey, we're going to come at this meeting with a get it done philosophy. As soon as we're done, we're done. Because otherwise, if people see, oh, we have 30 minutes left, they can kind of stretch it out, or let's just talk about things that we don't need to talk about. So having kind of a, thinking of a good term for this, take the time it takes philosophy for meetings, then you can cut down time there. The other thing is, it really does help to pre-plan what you're going to do with your time. Otherwise, when you come in, say to your office or your workspace, you could spend 15, 20, 30 minutes kind of futzing around and like getting warmed up and thinking about what we're going to do, versus if you come in and say, all right, I'm going to take 10 minutes to plan everything out and then really focus and work, but also giving yourself mental breaks now and then to reset and recharge. But just kind of noticing where you do end up kind of wasting time, and getting curious about what's going on there. But really coming at it from a place of non-judgment, just curiosity. Oh, interesting. I just lost 30 minutes on Facebook. How did that happen? I wonder what I was avoiding this task because it's boring. Okay, now I know what's going on. So kind of getting curious.
In regards to the meetings, I try to batch them together, preferably back to back in less than an hour, like you said, so that it'll make me cut off. I've got another commitment I have to get to. Now I have to be careful. I've done that before. It's been one right after the other, and I realized I had no time in between for a bathroom break.
Yes.
So, I can't have them too big a block, but a few at a time. And then I hate it when they end up having say a half hour in between, because it's not enough to really get anything done. But so I just end up having a bunch of filler time during my day that ends up going to waste. So
yeah, That's a great tip, Nicole. Batching meetings, or if you do have a half-hour filler, use that as your shallow task email time. But building in bathroom breaks. The other thing I do is I batch my meetings at the end of the day, because I know the morning is when I personally like to work and be productive with my deep work. So I leave my meetings, if I can, till the end of the day.
I started completely blocking my mornings out sometime last year. I just said, I don't like having people put meetings on my calendars in the morning. Now the trick is to come in and actually get my deep work done and not futz around for the first hour of my day. So
great tips.
These are all great questions. All right. Well, if you have any other questions, I'm sure you can reach out to Dr. Shenvi, but just wanted to say thank you so much. We're truly honored that you share this time with us on how to be intentional with our time. I know I'm looking forward to doing some of that deep work that you discussed. It's not going to be easy, but I'm going to do it. I will do it. And thank you everyone else for taking the time out of your busy day to be here. Obviously, we'd love your feedback. So I'll send out an email where you can take a quick survey, since I know a lot of people jumped off here. But yes, thank you so much for attending. We will be having our next leadership study on October 18th. So we hope that you'll join us for that topic on stretch. And obviously, if you missed anything on today's discussion, we'll be archiving this on our online library, and I'll extend that link to you all shortly, as well as the handouts that Dr. Shenvi mentioned about the time management. So thank you everybody who stayed on and is watching this back. We appreciate you all, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.